Hello and welcome. This is From Silence to Resilience. My name is Riv, and I'm very happy you're here. I want to do something a little different today. I want to share some feelings I've been dealing with, some things that have been coming up for me, honestly, for my whole life in one way or another, but certainly in a unique new iteration over the last 2.5 years, and in particular over the last year almost. I'm going to begin by describing a tarot card that comes up for me a lot when I'm drawing from a particular deck. This is from the Shadowscapes deck. A little bit of background about me and tarot. I've been interested in tarot since I was in my teens, and I've been reading tarot from this particular deck as well as other decks since I was about 18. So basically my whole adult life. In this particular image, we have a character who is standing on top of this kind of impossible looking stone or rock tower. I'm reminded of games that I played when I was growing up that involved piling things on top of each other as precariously as possible and trying not to let the structure fall. That's kind of what this looks like. It's a very narrow, again, like I said, seemingly impossibly balanced structure made of stone. In the background, all we see is sky. It's kind of unclear whether it's night or day. I'm inclined to say night because there are lots of little dots of white, which make me think of stars, and the character is holding a lantern. But also there is a source of light in the sky, which is quite yellow and quite bright. At the base of the card, there are several geese flying. So we know this character is very high up. They're in a seemingly precarious position. They are wearing robes that billow about them. They are looking intently. They're leaning forward and looking intently into the sky in the direction of the source of light. As with really any one of the tarot cards, I could talk about it forever. There are seemingly endless applications. What I like about tarot is that when I'm drawing cards, I can piece together a story based on the cards that show up. And when I just pull one card, I don't, is actually what happens. I don't just pull one card. Sometimes I try to do this, the whole one card pull, but there's so much that could be said about any given tarot card. And for me with this deck, it is so illustratively drawn, as in, or painted, in the sense that it looks like an illustration from a fairy tale. So one could come up with a very long, if not never-ending, story based on just one of the cards. So I'm going to stop describing this card for the moment. There are a few reasons why this card resonates with me. It's one of my favorite illustrations in the deck. It comes up for me from time to time quite frequently. This is one of those cards that I've related to most across tarot decks. Other folks who also are interested in tarot probably can relate to having a different type of connection to different types of decks with different types of illustrative styles, resonating with one particular art style more than another or in different ways. And then also having some cards that resonate with you, like I said, across decks. I feel like a lot of tarot readers can relate to that because I've heard many tarot readers describe things like this. The Hermit resonates with me because the character is solitary. Regardless of the deck, regardless of the art style, the Hermit is alone. I don't have a dictionary in front of me, but hermits live by themselves. They live often in nature, somewhere secluded. The Hermit could be anything from a Nick Offerman type dude with a beard living in the woods in a log cabin he built for himself. A hermit could also be a reference librarian who works with other people but often gets to work by themselves in the back of a library where it's quiet, they're surrounded by books, and maybe they go home to a quiet apartment with their cat. There are many ways that the archetype of the Hermit could be applied to different types of people. Some of the themes that seem to carry through include that being separate from other people and also being in nature to some extent. I'm not going to go into the more traditional themes of the card beyond what directly applies to what I'm talking about in this episode. I'm just trying to give a general idea of the card, of the archetype, as well as this particular illustration from the Shadowscapes deck. The reason I relate to this card is, like I said, that sense of isolation, of not being around other people, possibly being around nature. I feel like it's usually depicted as a person who's outside, who is going somewhere, who's traveling, who's on a journey. I mean, the tarot is the fool's journey, right? Thinking about this card in terms of my experience of life, my journey has felt very, very lonely. Sometimes it's because there aren't many people around me. In 2020 and the beginning of 2021, there really was no feasible way to be around people at all for me. In addition to the inaccessibility of the world in general, and also the specific risks and inaccessibility of COVID, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't be around anybody for the most part. And then there are times where you feel alone, but you're around a lot of other people. I think of myself in high school, surrounded by hundreds of people, but feeling very alone, not really having many, if any, other person to connect with, to get to know, to be in relationship with. It just really didn't happen for the most part. And sometimes it's both. Sometimes there's the sense, the feeling of lots of people around me, but also not really being able to be around people, like both. And that's what I'm feeling now. And I think where a lot of that comes from is the existence of social media, which really wasn't a thing as much when I was, say, in high school or younger. At this point in my life, as an almost 33-year-old, every day I can connect to spaces where I see I'm observing other people. There's even the opportunity to interact with other people. And also in the tangible world, my ability to be around other people is so limited, both by COVID safety and my own health needs and risks, and also, like I said earlier, accessibility in general, or rather inaccessibility in general. I first was experiencing being a physically disabled person when I was 9. And apart from the extreme inaccessibility of the private school I went to during grade school, the world, the public spaces in my life have not gotten any more accessible in the last 25 almost years that I've been disabled. So in 2022, the world around me is no more accessible than it was in 1998. What a strange reality. So in these often virtual spaces, sometimes I will observe other people and interact with other people who can relate to my experience of life, who are at risk. And seemingly only the people who are most at risk are the ones who are still paying any sort of attention to COVID precautions. It's very frustrating and very exhausting to observe people both in tangible life and in virtual life who are going about their days just not taking any sort of different precautions in 2022 than they would have in 2019. And the damnedest thing about it, well, one of them, is in 2020, when mask mandates were more common or more generally adopted by the country, and I'm speaking to America because that's where I live, when masks were being worn more generally during that time, things like the common cold and the flu were affecting fewer people. Fewer people were getting sick and fewer people were dying. So even just that, you'd think that we'd learn, that we'd say, oh, we observed that not only did it keep us safe or more safe from this particular virus, it also kept people safe from stuff that is always a problem, that's always here. But the lack of response, the eagerness to return to a pre-COVID time, even though we are not remotely in a pre or post-COVID time, that is a perfect example of why I haven't seen any improvement in accessibility and safety for disabled people in my life, in the areas I've lived in. No wonder. Because even when we as a whole group, as a whole country, have literally lived through and observed precautions saving lives and being useful in more contexts than just COVID, there's this insistence to not take those precautions. It's no wonder that in the same country, with the same population of people, it's no wonder that public spaces are not more physically accessible now in 2022 than they were, at the very least, in the 90s, and possibly in many areas even earlier than that. I'm just going to briefly mention that, yes, there is the Americans with Disabilities Act that was passed when I was a wee babe. I was a couple years old when that was passed. But it's not really enforced. And even when it is enforced, it's not always enforced to the best possibility, the most accessible possibility. And in many cases, it's simply not enforced. So I'm sure that there were improvements from the time before I was born to by the time I became disabled myself. But having heard from other disabled people who have either lived through that, the before and after, and those who have studied it and know more about it than I do, the overwhelming conclusion is it is not nearly enough. And then what ends up happening? I'm just one disabled person. I have my own unique experience of disability with my own unique intersecting identities. What I've observed from other disabled and chronically ill people and immunocompromised people, high-risk people, most of us feel very alone. Most of us are the oddballs who require and or demand a level of precaution that most other people, even in our own communities, our own friend groups, and our families, most other people just refuse to participate in. That is lonely. Because what are we left with? What choice are we left with? We can stay apart if we have the privilege or ability to do so. We might choose to just not be around a whole bunch of people who are a part of our lives, or we'd like to be a part of our lives, because they won't change. Even though they can, that's the difference. We can't change what we need to be safe. We can't adjust our needs so that we have fewer. The only thing we can do is compromise our safety, compromise our health, and participate in life at our own risk. It does not put a non-disabled person's life or safety at risk for them to accommodate us most of the time. I'm sure there's some exception to the rule, but the majority of the time, the most it would do is inconvenience somebody, annoy somebody. And between risking annoyance or risking one's health, I think the more important consideration is a person's health, not a person's level of comfort. Hearing myself say that, I'm thinking of the language that has been used over the course of this pandemic, which is ongoing. One of the words that has been thrown around is comfort, or the phrase comfort level. And very often, the phrase comfort level is referred both to a non-disabled person feeling comfortable with or without a mask. It's also been used to describe at-risk people, high-risk people who need other people to also mask. And those are not the same thing. And using the same language to describe a health need and a comfort need or desire, comfort level, those are not the same level of priority, at least not for me. So we are left feeling very alone. And then when we can't choose to leave a group that won't abide by this, that won't abide by uncommon decency, community protection, people who don't take precautions, when we can't separate, we are still left feeling isolated because eventually, most likely, we will then end up harmed, needing to go to the hospital, developing a new or worsened condition or series of symptoms. We'll become more disabled, and then we won't be able to be around other people, either because we'll just simply be forced to isolate or die, or will be hospitalized, or will die. I'm really familiar with just saying, oh, fuck it, to my own health and safety needs and trying to keep up with the people in my life, adjust to what they like, what they feel comfortable with, and risking my own life to do so in some cases. At a certain point, it got so bad that I was hospitalized. My symptoms, my conditions got so bad it was life or death. That's before COVID. Now I'm in a position where I do have the ability to just simply withdraw from other people, which is a privilege to be able to do so. It means that I can live longer. It means that I can look after my own health. That's a really enormous privilege, and one that I have not always had. And also, it's that hermit life. Maybe I don't want to be the hermit on that particular day. Maybe I want to be the empress or something. I want to be one of the twos. I want to be with people. I want to be in groups. But I can't, because those groups, those spaces have become so inaccessible, I have no choice. The hermit. Feeling alone hits me hard sometimes, a lot of the time. It's always been really hard for me to feel isolated, ostracized, or both. Even before dystonia, I had PTSD. I acted out. I was punished and isolated. My peers knew that I had the tendency to act out, and so they would stay away from me. So I've experienced isolation pretty much my whole life, to one extent or another, for one reason or another, and it always sucks. Yes, there are times where I like my space, but there are times where I want to be in community. I look at the non-disabled people around me. I look at the non-mentally ill, or at least minimally mentally ill people around me, and I observe their relationships. I hear about what they do for fun, and I'm like, I want that. I want to be able to go to parties. I want to be able to have spur of the moment solo or friend adventures, traveling and just spending time. Most of the time, I can't have that for many different reasons, but most of them having to do with me being mentally ill, physically disabled, chronically ill, or they're because of inaccessibility, my symptoms themselves, COVID safety, people's lack of a willingness to adjust and accommodate. It really sucks. Sometimes it sucks so bad that I feel suicidal. I have felt this way my whole life. I am literally the furthest thing from a love and light person. I do not believe in positivity, toxic or otherwise. I am a pessimist with a cheerful disposition. That's me. So I'm not here to tie this up neatly and say, well, as long as you can remember nature, or you can connect to what you are able to do, connect to who you are able to connect to. No, I'm not tying this up neatly. I want this to be uncomfortable for non-disabled people. I want you to think about what you've done and what you haven't done. That's what I want. Because regardless of what disabled people need to do to navigate life feeling constantly ostracized, harmed, not considered, etc. Yeah, there are things we can do to cope, but we should not have to cope. Similarly to how women or girls might choose to go about town in groups, might try to wear or dress or present themselves in a particular way to try and avoid being harmed by men. Now, I am not a girl and I'm not yet a woman. I'm non-binary, but I am seen as a girl, as a woman. I have been treated as a girl, as a woman my whole life. So I know this. I know that it is not safe for us non-cis men, it's not safe for us to go out and about alone. And there are things that we can do to try and mitigate the harm, but sometimes there's just only so much that we can do. At a certain point, at every point, it is the responsibility of the person with more power to change their actions. Yeah, there are ways that women, that non-men, non-binary people, there are ways that we cope, but we should not have to cope. And no more so should disabled people have to learn how to cope with being isolated, harmed, ostracized, because non-disabled people refuse to accommodate us, refuse to listen to us, refuse to do anything differently in order for us to experience more community, for us to experience more adventure, for us to experience more family and love, because we deserve that. We deserve it just as much, and I might argue more than a whole lot of non-disabled people, because we experience it the least. Or rather, being disabled makes you so much more likely to experience isolation. The hermit life sometimes chooses us, sometimes we choose it. No one should be condemned to be a hermit. Just like any lifestyle, it should be up to the individual to decide if that's what's right for them, if that's what connects with them, if that's their identity. No one else really should be choosing that, but here we are. Non-disabled people, you need to accommodate us. I don't care if it's inconvenient. Your inconvenience is nowhere near as important as my or any other disabled or high-risk person's safety and well-being. Thank you for listening. Until next time.